Hello to all who are looking at us and listening also. A warm welcome. I may say for this moment we have a very interesting meeting out of different reasons. I'm quite happy to present to you Mimika Dobroshi. Uh, she is from Kosovo. Everybody shall remember it is the youngest state in Europe, for sure, also connected with a lot of problems, but I may say also with a lot of chances. First information. Second information, I met Mimika in Kosovo, but also later on, because she, and it was a very interesting experience, the first representative of Kosovo in international organization. Which international organization? It was a stability. The Americans made with the definition of Kosovo going in the direction to an independent state after the war, the suppression by Milosevic, and brought the possibility and the need for the in international and European organizations. But it was extremely difficult because we had a lot of those who were opposing it. It's not mature, and so I may say, to make a longer story short, Mimika in this time was the first Kosovar being inside in such an organization. That Kosovo was learning how to contribute and how the things can go on here. So far, it's an interesting story, and maybe later on, if you are writing your memories about your life, you shall also write about this. I don't know if a lot of new states will come later on. But I think this will be interesting to meet you here. And I think as an introduction, it would be quite good if you are describing what you are doing now under the auspices of Kosovo, of Europe, of the development, and so on.
Okay, thank you so much. It's so nice to see you, first of all, after a year, I think, since we last met. It's true, it's been quite a journey. I was born in Kosovo, I was raised here. I studied abroad for a long time. And when I was in Stability Pact, first as an intern, if you remember, and then as an employee there. It's funny because I think from Stability Pact, I worked on regional cooperation, and I still continue to do that, even now that I'm in Kosovo for a year. So sometimes I think I better know the region than my own country, because it's been since 2007 that I worked in regional cooperation issues, be it either from Stability Pact or later on with the succession of Stability Pact to Regional Cooperation Council. And now at the moment, I work for the GIZ, the German Development Agency. Basically, they have a lot of projects in Kosovo, and they've been present here since the end of the conflict, so since '99. And now they work a lot on development issues, but also on, they have this open regional fund for Southeast Europe, where they try to promote European integration through regional cooperation. And this is exactly the part where I come in. And through this role, I help the Kosovo institutions, specifically the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which for the first time in history, last year has taken over chairmanship in office of the Southeast European cooperation process. So for those who have heard of this STCP for the first time, it is a political organization that was formed in '96 in Sofia, that came sort of from bottom-up approach from the countries of Southeast Europe, and Kosovo joined in 2014, and it's comprised of 13 countries, so all of Western Balkans 6 plus Slovenia, Croatia, Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, Turkey, and Moldova. So for the first time, Kosovo is chairing this important organization, and we already have some important activities starting from last September, when we had the informal ministers of foreign affairs meeting, which was the first time that Kosovo was sort of chairing an initiative with all the almost all ministers of foreign affairs were present, even of those countries that did not recognize Kosovo, like Greece, for example. So it was this really an amazing meeting to see, especially I that have sort of seen this Kosovo trajectory joining the regional initiatives and organizations. This was really sort of like we have come for full circle. In just 5 or 6 years ago, I couldn't imagine that we would hold the foreign ministers of Southeast Europe and chair it and bring the agenda on the table. Then we had the Young Diplomat seminar, we had Chambers of Commerce meeting of all Southeast Europe here in Pristina last December. But unfortunately, with the coronavirus and this pandemic, we had to cancel all the activities we had planned for this 6 remaining months, because it's a 1-year chairmanship. And now we're preparing for the summit, which will be held end of June in Pristina, but it's going to be probably sort of online, same as the Zagreb Summit was held. So this is a pity. I would love to see all those delegations here in Pristina. I think it's different when you meet people face to face. But I think for now we have to be sort of content that summit is held in a sort of online way.
If you allow me to add 2 questions. First question, you are working with GIZ. I think you should a little bit explain what it is. As far as I know, and I was working with them, it is a German institution based on the development ministry in Berlin. What are they doing? What are they investing? And what is your experience? And the second question is, if you're looking back and even I think what is your experience on this way coming in on the European level? Here difficulties coming from a young state, not being accepted still by all, because 5 EU member states are not yet accepting that Kosovo is an independent part, and so on and so on. I think what are here...
Okay, well, I will take the last question first. It is always challenging. First as a Kosovar, and second as a woman. Back in 2007, when I was in Brussels and I was introducing myself, and I had the UN travel document back then. We didn't even have passports. I remember once I lost my passport and we didn't have back then embassies to renew it. So it was this whole struggle contacting the UN administration here, issuing a letter, letting me cross the border between Belgium, coming with airplane to Kosovo airport. So everything is a struggle. I mean, when you're a Kosovar, so all professionally and personally, not to mention the visa issues, which are still present. So whatever, all complications, all sort of obstacles, both economic, political, social, that other Western Balkans countries have, you can double those for Kosovars, because for us it's always a burden, the unfinished statehoods, the non-recognition. There are procedural matters that are always come to play to make things difficult. Then there's also perception. I mean, back then in Brussels, I had prejudices a lot from people where I come from. It was a bit bizarre who would work there. And so it's a lot to do with mentality and so on and so on. So yes, I would say that that's why somehow every time I see a Kosovar achieve something anywhere in whichever field, I sort of have a tremendous pride and respect for them, because I know that as hard as it is for everyone, for Kosovars, it's probably a bit more harder than for the rest, for any issue, even if it's the most technical issue. So that would be sort of shortly my explanation how I lived it. As for the GIZ, I think they've been present in Kosovo since 1999 with a lot of projects, emergency help at the time, but now they're much more focused on the social development, environment, climate change, economic development, employment, rural development, governance and democracy, and even they always say that although they are present in all the countries in the region, apparently they have, in Kosovo, it's one of the biggest offices. So they have a lot of expertise and funds, and they work a lot with almost all levels of our administration, and they're one of the biggest donors. They are a German development fund. They're international, so they have projects all over the world and in Southeast Europe. And the most sort of recent is this ORF that they call the Open Regional Fund, which they also provide projects that help EU integration through regional cooperation, which is something new, I think, that they didn't have before. So they cooperate with RCC as well. And they're very involved also in the Berlin process. I know just in November, the regional office of GIZ in Sarajevo organized here, together with the MFA of Kosovo, a regional meeting to take stock of what happened in the Poznan summit of the Berlin process and prepare sort of for the next summit, which will be held in September or October in Sofia. Because now the presidency of the Berlin summit is taken by Bulgaria and North Macedonia. So they help also with the Berlin process as well. So this is shortly about the GIZ.
Thank you very much. It is a good information of those who are not so much aware about Balkan affairs or Southeast Europe. I think it's really of importance. But I think on the other side, it would be very interesting if you are telling something, how is the job you are doing and other representatives of Kosovo are doing on the international level, on the European level and so on, how is it perceived in Kosovo? Is it registered? Is a part of the population looking to this? Has it an importance? What are the critiques? In which way is it done? Also concerning regional cooperation, because you were mentioning the Southeast European cooperative process, I think, are the Kosovars, the representative of Kosovars, aware that they need a better cooperation, integration in the region? Because the region, I think, is of great importance because it's a weaker part of Europe, and so far we have to be very careful. Can you tell us something?
Yes, well, from my personal viewpoint and working in regional, both in RCC and now for the chairmanship, I think we're not there yet. I don't think Kosovar institutions grasp that much the importance of regional cooperation. And that is, in one way, I can understand it because they're so overwhelmed with national politics and all the work that they have to do nationally. So this is on top of their agenda, and I don't think they see the benefits yet. Like, for me, it's interesting now because I worked in Brussels, then in Sarajevo until last year, and since last summer I'm here in Kosovo after a long time. I can see that actually we're still in the same phase as when I left. It's still the question, are we members of this organization? What is our status in this organization? Are we mentioned with Kosovo asterisk, or are we still what is our political status? So it's very hard to work on the substance because each of these regional organization or initiative has a topic which is thematic, so it's related to line ministries, be it education, infrastructure, transport, and so on. So you actually need to work with experts in line ministry. And sometimes I find it that it's hard to work on these issues when you have still political disagreements, sort of making it more difficult. The agreement that was reached between Belgrade and Pristina on regional cooperation in 2013 really eased, sort of ushered in this participation of Kosovo and allowed us to be members in several regional organizations. So that was, I thought that from 2013 now to 2020, this chapter would be closed. You know, we wouldn't anymore question our status, whether we are members or not, or how. I thought that by now, 7 years afterwards, we would be more focused on, okay, what are the benefits of Kosovo from these regional initiatives? How can we best implement them nationally? What we need even from the Berlin process, because it has a whole agenda with it, the regional economic area and the multi-annual action plan. I don't know, for me, it's more important sometimes to work on the substance and the topics in these regional agendas than the status. Although I can understand that without settling first how you are represented there, it's always difficult. And this you know better from Stability Pact.
That's right. But thank you very much.
So it's still present, I would say, which is a pity. I mean, it is a pity because I would think that by now other issues would be more important. And this is, of course, because a lot of bilateral issues were not resolved. So it's the chicken and egg situation, whether you first resolve the issue with Serbia and then you come back to regional cooperation of all six, or you try to ease the bilateral disputes through regional cooperation. And that is possible, and in my experience, I've seen it. I've seen technical cooperation of all six without having to bring up the political disputes. But that can go up to a certain level. It cannot, once you have, well, we need to sign an agreement or have some paper that will say that we are recognizing the professional qualifications, or, you know, once you reach that high up politically, then there's always back to zero. Then it's always political issues sort of take over, and then everything that was done technically sort of drops.
Mimika, I very much support your position on this subject because I think it will be the only solution. You won't get a solution between Kosovo and Serbia I think you have to integrate or to connect Kosovo with all the neighbors and even further on in Europe, that Serbia is coming to the position that they have to accept that Kosovo is existing. I think I'm always saying it's a little bit critical, or it's very critical on Serbia. I think the Serbs will accept the existence of Kosovo, I think, a week after they have decided to accept it. I think it will be everything always very late done, because I think it is not really a political problem. It's too much connected with a lot of mythology and history understanding and so on and so on. So far, I think it is better you are concentrated on the question you have mentioned, to create more regional cooperation and more integration to Europe, even besides the fact that the position for joining the European Union is not always looking very marvelous, we have to say quietly. Please tell me two things. First of all, as far as I'm informed, you have now no government, or in between, looking for a government. What does it mean in this context? Is the connection, the integration, the cooperation with the neighbors a subject concerning building up a government? And the second point, what is the perception in Kosovo by the citizens itself of this situation? Are they desperate, or have they still a hope, or have they enough good condition to come through to all these things?
Yes, so during this confinement and lockdown phase that we were since, I think we were in lockdown since 12th of March, when we had the first cases of coronavirus, and the government decided to sort of bring lockdown measures then, and more restrictive measures. So we would, and the schools were closed and businesses and everything, so we would sort of manage it better, because we have a health system which is, for a long time, it hasn't been developed, or it hasn't been financed. So I think we knew the constraints we would have if the coronavirus situation got out of hand, as it did in Italy or in other countries. So I think in that respect, we sort of contained it well by locking down early on. Now, it's been 2 months since we had those restrictions, and are still in place, a bit more loosely, but still in place. And it's on this situation in every country, and in Kosovo, we would have this political crisis. The motion of no confidence vote, which was taken by the LDK, the coalition partner of the self-determination party, the Vetëvendosje. And they gathered the rest of the opposition, and they voted down the government. Now we're not without a government. So this government that was voted, had the motion to be taken down, it's still a caretaker government. So they're still sort of functioning. Their main aim is to contain the pandemic. So that's really, it has been from the beginning of this crisis, this has become their priority, which is, I think, reasonable. In every country in the world, it's like that. But the regional cooperation is definitely not on their top 10 priority list, I'm sure, because with the emergency measures for the coronavirus, there are several other issues that come into play. For example, all these the emergency situation and the lockdown and the restrictions have caused for but all of the small and medium-sized businesses to be closed down. The schools were closed down. So the economic effects of this closing down are very big. And there are certain projections that Kosovo and the whole region will be hit very hard. one other factor is that also, as you know, we have a lot of our economic sort of, how can I say, remittances are one of our main economic source still in Kosovo. So that is expected to be hit hard as well, because also in EU, where most of the remittances come from, also economically, they have a slowdown in this period. The government has taken, I think, a month ago, this stimulus package, fiscal stimulus package to help the businesses. But most of them had to lay down their employees at least by 50%, especially these small and medium-sized businesses. So I think the main priority for the government, beside containing the outbreak of the virus, is and will be economic recovery, economic and social recovery, because a lot of those social strata that were in poverty, now those are hit the worst, I think. And this is going to be a challenge, I think, even for the caretaker government, for sure, but even for the next one who comes after it. Now, with this political situation, there are two, the main disagreement is that the Vedvendosje party, which was, which had the motion to, which the opposition actually voted them out of the government, they want to hold elections. So they say, we're going to deal with the pandemic, but the minute the situation improves, we have to have elections, because that is the most legitimate way the citizens can believe the next government to be. And with this approach, they're gaining a lot of support and sympathy in the media, in the population. So I think this has given them a lot of support, and they think that, according to their estimates, that they would be able to form the government if there are elections on their own. And then there's the president of Kosovo, who has, according to a constitution, Kosovo constitution, if a government is faces a vote of no confidence, then he has to call a member of the same winning party to propose another candidate from the same party to be prime minister and to form a government. And that, I mean, the current prime minister was reluctant to sort of do that. So what President did, President Thaci, is that he called the second party with the biggest votes from October, and asked them to form a government. So then they voted the government with the smaller parties, and they informed the president that they have the votes and everything, that they are going through with this minority government. President Thaci sent this decree to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court said that we're not going to say anything until the 19th of May. So they sort of stopped, said, okay, we will consider this, but we'll get back to you on 19th of May. So now we're all waiting what the Constitutional Court said. And there's just a big polarization of the opposition, of the party that's in power. There are a lot of underlying issues in each of their conviction. Citizens are very much polarized as well, whether they belong to the parties that were once that were always in government, like those from the war wing, or now the Vedvendosje, which is a party that was, it's a party that doesn't have it, how should I say it? I don't know how to describe it, but it came out of a movement, citizens movement, and they're left-leaning social democrat, but they also are very much against all the corruption and everything that was done by previous parties, from the previous political parties who were traditionally always in government, like LDK, AK, or PDK. So there's a big sort of division between these two blocks of parties. And I cannot speculate what will happen. We'll wait for the Constitutional Court, what they will say. But a lot of citizens are saying that have citizens believe in the next government, so they can actually do anything with full legitimacy is new elections. And for that, I don't think, no one can predict how the virus situation will go on, so the conditions will be met to have new elections. So we'll
for sure, my dear Mimika, that makes it not easier, because if you have constitutional questions, and it's obviously the case, it's always even more difficult. It's a question of interpretation, who is of the right side, is it based on law and constitution, and so on and so on. And I think my only wish to Kosovo is that they are going out of this situation. What is the perception of the citizens in common of this situation? Are they desperate over politics? Are they desperate of the general situation of Kosovo? Or is there a movement, especially by the youngsters, I think, to get solutions or to have a government who is able to make decisions? And the second question, and it's always very much connected with the Kosovars, and you mentioned it concerning the money coming out from the outside Kosovars to you. Is there still a strong tendency for leaving Kosovo to work outside? Because I think there's not enough jobs in Kosovo. If you can give a short overview about this, I would be very grateful.
Okay. Actually. So the first one, yes, I think they are desperate. I think the situation is a bit desperate because everyone is so focused on containing the virus and not getting it. So they're not in the mood to deal with sort of these pettiness of politicians, whether he's right and he's wrong, and now we need a new government. I think with this government, a lot of people were happy how they start. They had a really, and although they were a coalition government of two parties, LDK and Vedvendosje, and with several minorities, they really had sort of a good response, that they're doing a good job, that the ministers that were put in place were really professional. Like the Minister of Education was pointed out, she handled very well. She immediately started the whole online platform for students not to stop since the schools were closed. She reacted very fast to digitalize everything. So also the Minister of Infrastructure, he moved very fast with a lot of issues concerning his department. Then Minister of Health, who's still there, but he is he's one of the most popular persons now in Kosovo, I think, because he handled it really professionally. What is more, he really handled well also the situation with regards to the Serb community. I mean, he had held a joint meeting with the mayor of the north of Mitrovica, and he offered everything. That it was a very humane sort of response from the Ministry of Health. I mean, even the north of Kosovo and the Serb-populated areas will have all the support they can. And Serbia again gave 1,000 testing kits to Kosovo for COVID-19. So there was also some positive things that came out of this whole COVID-19 crisis. So I think people wanted to at least be left alone from all the politics for a while they deal with this issue, because I mean most of them were either working from home or sacked out of their jobs because of the economic lockdown. So I don't think there was appetite for more politics at this time. So that's why I think that's where their desperation comes from. And it was the first time during the lockdown that I've seen there were protests from the balconies with a spoon and the pans, you know, just to so. And I remember that was the last time we had that was in the 90s during Milosevic, when we were unable to protest on the streets, but we had our creative ways of. So I think, yes, people are fed up with politics at this time, and they just want to be left alone to deal with the issues that are so, with their immediate issues, you know, how to bring food on the table, to stay afloat economically, and how not to get this virus. So yes, this is, I think, how the majority feels. Now, with the young people, I mean, now the borders are closed. So, of course, a lot of people who were abroad in many countries came back in waves, because the Ministry of Transport needed to sort of, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs needed to repatriate them in phases, because they needed to be in sort of isolation for 2 weeks. So they were coming in sort of waves, all these people that were for some situation in EU and US. There are some positives I've seen here with regards to employment of young people. There's a lot to do with the Innovation Center in Kosovo and all these other regarding the ICT sector. I think that is a big sort of revenue, not revenue, but that's a big sort of projection that young people can benefit from that area and employed in that sector in Kosovo, because we have a young and educated population, and the living standards here are lower. So there's a lot of outsourcing to foreign companies working from Kosovo. So you just need a laptop and a place, and you do the work from here. So there's a lot of sort of focus on that side. But I haven't seen any sort of government initiative on that. What I'm talking about is usually projects who funded, or the ICT sector itself, or innovation center, or all these startups that have started. So it's usually an sort of self-made, all these entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship sort of entrepreneur youngsters that are here in Kosovo. So I think there's a future there. I mean, I don't know how this situation will develop and how they were sort of impacted by the whole COVID-19 situation, but from what I saw from the startups and lots of people who are Kosovars living in diaspora, who came back and opened these startups, and now work from here. I hope that sort of sector takes it, you know, sort of develops more and grows.
Thank you very much, Mimika, for the description you did, and also for the positive perspective at the end of your remarks. For my feeling and by some knowledge of the situation, I'm happy about some kinds of cooperation with Serbian parts and so on and so on, because I think that's also necessary because you have to live together without any doubt. But sometimes we have all problems, and that these signs are coming up is very good. And the second remark, which I want to underline, was a positive perspective you gave at the end by the young generation. I was always deeply impressed by the young people in Kosovo because they tried to change their situation and they did something. Because we, in the older part of Europe, we have sometimes the tendency to be angry about everything. I think that's not helpful. I think we have to do some things that we are coming forward, and that's really great. Mimika, I would say let's close with this. It is a positive perspective, and I'm extremely grateful to you. And I may say also a positive perspective which you are driving, and I wish you in this context all the best. I have to do a closing remark. The closing remark is I'm inviting all that are looking at us to use it, and also to join an activity which the Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe is doing. I think to do something on our activity, what matters Europe. I think we are inviting you to join this. You can see it here on the on the information giving by the IDN. And also, I think you shall look for some objectives you can show us which have some importance for Europe, because Europe has to be our future for sure. Mimika, many thanks also for your future and the opportunity not so long ago to see us again, and I would be very happy to do so. Thanks a lot, Mimika.
Thank you so much, Dr. Busek.